Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, February the 19th, 2026. In 1966, that was 60 years ago, there was a dramatic fall in the birth rate in Japan, particularly the birth of girls. And the reason for this fall in the birth rate was apparently superstition. Apparently, girls who are fire horses are somehow unfortunate. They are attracting bad luck. And you saw a similar fall in the birth rate 60 years before that in 1906. So, what is it about the fire horse that is unlucky? And is there any evidence for this? And who might be impacted by this? And it's not just people. Let's not forget that England is a fire horse, and this kind of might spread to sort of the British Isles, because one of the charts you can use for England is the 1066 chart, when William the Conqueror became British king. And 1066, if you work it out, is a fire horse, because 900 years, 60s go into 900. I think that's 60 is going to 915 times, so 900 years ago was 1126, and 60 years before that is 1066. So you can kind of work out quite easily that England in 1066 is a fire horse. So that's what I want to consider at the end of this video. Is there something unfortunate about being a fire horse? And it's not just about people, it's about nations as well. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, February the 19th. And, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time on Thursday. And you can see that the moon is in late Pisces. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So at noon New York time, the moon is at late Pisces. It is getting ready to move into Aries. The moon moves into Aries at 7:39 p.m. London time. So if you're in New York, that means sort of early afternoon. What's that? 2:39 in the afternoon. The moon will move into Aries. If you're in California, that will be sort of late morning. That would be 11:39. So it is a bit of a changeover day. Moon moving out of Pisces into Aries. We've got this sort of big Pisces build up here. We've got Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon in Pisces. I think that's as good as it gets, having 4 planets in Pisces. I don't think we're going to get 5 planets in Pisces because Venus is going to be moving out of Pisces quite soon. I think it's March the 6th. So before Mars gets a chance to move into Pisces. When does Mars move into Pisces? Let me just check that. So Mars moves into Pisces. I should have known that, but Mars goes into Pisces. Well, in fact, Mars goes into Pisces on the 3rd. Mars goes into Pisces on the 3rd of March. So there will be a time when you're going to have Venus, Mars, the Sun and Mercury in Pisces. So there will be another time when you do have 4 planets in Pisces, but there is a big Pisces emphasis at the moment. And then the moon is moving into Aries, and that does create a change. Moon moving into a fire sign. There is a lack of fire at the moment. In fact, there's a lack of earth, lack of fire, lack of earth. That's kind of interesting from a Jungian perspective. We have the emphasis on the rational axis. The rational axis, is about working things out ourselves and we use our intellect and perhaps our feelings as well to come to the right conclusions. The irrational axis, which is earth and fire, is about using sort of external means to work out what's going on. Perhaps, what things look like, data, or maybe our intuition. And that intuition is kind of external because it's like some energy that comes from outside, that perhaps comes from the cosmos. So that sign change is certainly an important event, and if you feel that things just aren't moving fast enough, that there's a certain lack of dynamism, then maybe the moon in Aries will help. Although we shouldn't forget that the moment the moon moves into Aries, it makes a conjunction to Saturn. In fact, it's called sort of making a conjunction to Saturn, kind of, as it moves through late Pisces, and then it makes a conjunction to Neptune. In fact, it makes a conjunction to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So we've got Moon, Saturn, Neptune all together. So yeah, there is something dynamic about that, but Moon conjunct Saturn, that could somewhat slow things down. But many of us are going to want action even before the sun moves into Aries, because the sun, even before the moon moves into Aries, because the sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. So the sun at 1 degrees Pisces is in a sort of a 135 degree aspect to Jupiter. So you put sun Jupiter together, and that means we have a certain desire to expand, to move things forward. We want to move things forward. We want more, and that can be a good thing. It can make us ambitious. We're thinking about what might be possible. But with Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, there's always a danger of overindulgence, taking something too far, perhaps taking our emotions too far, getting over emotional. So it's nice to be emotional, but maybe we can take things just a bridge too far. And aside from that, Mercury making a semi-square to Pluto. Mercury at 19 degrees Pisces, making a 45 degree aspect to Pluto. So it might be with that aspect that some of us respond to it by feeling that there are things we shouldn't say. I mean, Pluto is a planet that can hide things. It doesn't want to reveal. It wants to keep things underground. So with Mercury semi-square Pluto, we're going to respond to it in different ways, but certainly some people are going to respond to this by taking the view, things are difficult, things are heavy. We should be careful what we say, and some things are best kept hidden. There is an alternative interpretation of Mercury semi-square Pluto. You can see it as being, for example, about propaganda, being about influence. Pluto is about power, it's about control, and maybe some of us may respond to that Mercury semi-square Pluto by feeling that we have to manipulate, perhaps using our words, or perhaps silences as well. There are many ways to manipulate, and sometimes by working behind the scenes, perhaps by thinking behind the scenes, we can change the situation in our favour. So that's the broad picture. One other thing, Sun is making a semi-sextile to Saturn and Neptune. So the Sun, having just moved into Pisces, is making 30 degree aspects to Saturn and Neptune, and that could be somewhat difficult. I mean, we've got Saturn and Neptune conjunction coming up very, very soon. I mean, it's pretty much exact. And Saturn and Neptune can be about fear, the fear of the unknown, perhaps not being able to let go. And there could be an emotional fear with that Sun in Pisces. Sun in Pisces does want to let go, be part of the ocean. But then Saturn and Neptune is saying, is that such a good idea? You never know what might happen. So there are things going on today, and it's not a day that is necessarily going to be sort of free-flowing and easy, but I think it is interesting. So that there could be a lot to find out about today. So that's the day from the viewpoint of New York. If we set the chart instead for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australia and New Zealand, you see that the moon is at 19 Pisces. So moon at 19 Pisces, well, the moon, if you're in Australasia, the moon is not going to go into Aries today, and the moon is, well, moon is conjunct Mercury, it's trine Jupiter. So I think if you are in Australasia, possibly an easier day than if you're in the Americas. Having the moon in Pisces in mutual reception to Jupiter, moon and Jupiter in each other's sign, moon making a conjunction to Mercury, making that still in trine to Jupiter. I think it should be a relatively easy day, but you're still going to have that Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter. So don't exaggerate, particularly don't exaggerate on an emotional level. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system, and the Earth is now very much in Virgo. So there's the Earth in Virgo, and the Earth is making a square to Uranus. The Earth is also starting to make a quincunx to Neptune. It's starting to make a quincunx to Neptune. So, that says something about our experiences down here on planet Earth, and Earth square Uranus. Well, it does happen. It's an aspect that happens twice a year, so it's not particularly unusual, but we just may be just aware of how much change there could be. We live in a changeable environment. Things can happen quickly. We shouldn't assume that everything is going to work to plan, and it's the Uranus provides the surprises, and then the Earth quincunx Neptune provides the confusion. We'd like things to be straightforward, but they're not, and that's just something we have to deal with. Anyway, so that's the broad astrological picture, and now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, February the 19th, 2026. Aries, there is a change happening. The moon is moving out of Pisces and into Aries, which is your sign. And, this is perhaps, a taste of, things which are going to happen in a not so distant future. We're now in Pisces season. In a month's time, the Sun will move into Aries. Sort of earlier, well, I think it's the beginning of March. Venus is moving into Aries, so it won't be long before planets like the Sun and Venus move into your sign. In fact, Mars is going to be moving into your sign pretty quickly, pretty soon. So yeah, the Aries season is close, and with the moon moving into Aries, this is a reminder that it really is starting to happen. Now, this sign change, moon moving into your sign, when it happens kind of depends on your time zone. If you're in California, it will happen this morning. If you're in the UK, it won't happen until this evening. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it won't happen until tomorrow. But perhaps you can feel that something is coming to an end. We're perhaps losing that sort of Pisces, some of that Pisces emphasis. We're still getting over the new moon, aren't we? That new moon, which started in Aquarius, now that new moon has a rather Pisces feel to it. With the Sun and the Moon both in this sign, can for the average Aries feel that a bit problematic, in the sense that you might just not feel that you're fully able to express yourself, be yourself, at least not in a public setting. You'd rather focus on yourself and your own resources, and not have to worry about how much attention you're getting. But we do have a change unfolding, and you are sort of more ready to to be yourself, and also to be reminded of the fact that Saturn and Neptune are planets that are now in your sign. Because we do have the Moon applying to a conjunction of Saturn, and maybe you're not fully used to Saturn being in Aries, and the question is is it a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I've discussed this before, but I think that there is certainly a positive side to Saturn being in Aries. It can be about responsibility and taking yourself seriously. And so when the Moon moves into Aries, this can be a time when you feel that actually there are things that you need to do. You can't hide your light under a bushel forever, and you perhaps have to be more forthcoming, and that might be one of the challenges of the day. And it might not always be easy. Not everyone is going to be sympathetic. Certain people might just seem difficult, and getting close to people could be hard work. Now that might be because they are putting up barriers, they are resisting your advances, whatever those advances might be. Just trying to get someone's attention, trying to get some enthusiasm out of another person. Yeah, it could be hard work, and you just need to accept that. And it needn't be a problem, but you just have to be aware of that. And the concept of fear and things being held back is possibly going to be quite an important theme today, and not just today, but over the next few days. And we do have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction forming, and this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, it's very close at the moment, and it's in Aries. It's in the first degree of Aries even. So it's something that is collectively serious, and it is about whatever is holding everyone back. And it's really starting to get to you, and it may occur to you that you have a certain responsibility, that other people just cannot get it together on their own, and that maybe your leadership is required. And with the Moon moving into Aries, into your sign, this may be a sign that you have to do something. And it's not necessarily something that you're necessarily going to want to do to begin with, but you perhaps have to think about how you can be taken seriously. And that can be a challenge. You just want to be free. You want to do what you want. Typical Aries, but at a certain stage, you have to sort of turn around and maybe face the universe and see where your responsibility lies. So that is an important change for you taking place over the course of the day. And I think that people are not necessarily feeling on great form. I mean, it's easy to blame other people if they're not being enthusiastic enough, they're not being responsive, if they don't want to take the initiative. But you have to understand that this is something collective, and if anyone can deal with it, Aries, it's you. Taurus. So Taurus, we still have planets in Pisces for most of the day, and certainly if you're not in the Americas, for most of the day, the Moon until this evening at least, maybe into tomorrow, we've got the Moon moving through Pisces. And so I think that might suggest, at least on the surface, that it's a relatively straightforward day when you are able to relate quite well to your environment. Don't take anything too seriously, though. Just move from person to person, be there, and don't linger. I think that's quite important, and don't linger to the point where perhaps conversations become too serious. I mean, there is a serious aspect to today, for sure, but do you always want to address it? Do you need to address it? And it just might be better if you can, as far as you can, just go with the flow and somehow ignore, or okay, maybe not ignore your misgivings. I mean, you don't want to be completely wrapped up in your own negativity, but I mean, you could. I mean, certain things could set you off. I mean, I think that's perhaps the problem of today. You're quite happy. You're minding your own business, and then a subject crops up, something crops up, and it bothers you. It irritates you. And you keep thinking about it. You think about it again, and you think about it again and again and again, and it just doesn't make you happy. So, what do you do? Is it a case here, Taurus, that what do they say? When ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. It could be. Sometimes it's just best not to know. What might you be knowing about? Someone else's trivia, someone else's worries. They dump it on you, and you can't help it. You have to obsess about it, and I don't think that's a good place to be. So don't feel, Taurus, that you have to know. Not always, but sometimes it can't be helped. And once you start to look and think about what is happening, you start to become preoccupied, and one thing leads to another, and like yesterday, but maybe more intensely than yesterday, you could find yourself wrapped up in something that is just not very healthy. And once you start, one thought can lead to another thought, and it just goes round and round in circles, and you get distracted, and you're not being particularly efficient. And that is another reason why you shouldn't overload yourself with information. And if you find out, if you know too much, then it could slow you down in a big way. And it's also possible that you just might find yourself being seriously distracted and starting to go in directions that you don't really want to go into. And that, I think, is something that really should be avoided. So, Taurus, I'm not someone who sort of encourages triviality, floating around on the surface, because I think one's got to know. Knowledge is a good thing, but there are limits, and so as far as is possible, Taurus, I think it is a day where you should really try to just keep things simple. Now, if you can't keep things simple, if you do find yourself involved in something that seems quite heavy, then you're going to need some discipline. You should take the view that your job is to make progress, is to make sense of something, and not to create more worries than is necessary. Because this is a time when a lot of people are worried. We do have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the moment, and these concerns could get out of hand, and so you have to be very focused. And if there's something that needs to be resolved, well, resolve it, but don't feel you have to resolve other things. Just do the job, make sure it's done as well as is possible, and then just move on to something else. Gemini. Mercury is making a semi-square to Pluto. So this is Mercury in Pisces. It's making the semi-square to Pluto, and semi-squares to Pluto, not necessarily such a bad aspect. You can get in touch with the Pluto energy, but how this semi-square occurs to you, may to an extent depend on who you are. What kind of person you are. Mercury semi-square Pluto can make you make you quite serious. You realize that there are things that you absolutely need to focus on, and you don't want to get distracted, and that's probably a good thing, especially now, all these planets in Pisces. I think it's great that you've got all these planets in Pisces, even though Mercury is supposedly fallen in Pisces. I mean, it is fallen in Pisces. It's not so bad, because the sign Pisces gives you an idea about what you can do, what you can achieve. And so with Mercury semi-square Pluto, you can think about what needs to be done, and you can just get on with it, and you will have a certain sort of mental intensity, and certainly that is a good thing. Now, Mercury semi-square Pluto is an aspect which is kind of difficult to say how exactly it's going to manifest, because Pluto does have two sides to it. There is a side which makes things stronger, makes things more intense, but there's also the side to Pluto which hides. And so with Mercury semi-square Pluto, it's possible that some of the more timid Geminis can want to hide things. Timid Geminis. Am I a timid Gemini? I mean, maybe I don't seem to be a timid Gemini, but when it comes to introversion, I'm off the scale. Absolutely off the scale when it comes to an introvert. When you actually do the measurements, I'm a super introvert. So maybe I'm a timid Gemini. I hate, for example, making sort of out of the blue phone calls. That was dreadful. Years ago, I remember trying to ask strangers for things over the phone, like whether it's a job or whatever. I just can't do it. But maybe I'm a timid Gemini. Maybe I think too much. But yeah, if you are a timid Gemini, or you're feeling unsure of yourself, that Mercury semi-square Pluto could drive you underground, or might sort of make you think that there's nothing you can do, but it's best to keep quiet. I would not recommend that response. I think this Mercury semi-square Pluto should be empowering. You should regard it as being empowering. And after all, Gemini, this is a time to be thinking about your ambitions, to be thinking about what it is possible for you to achieve. You want to create a situation where you really can be successful, and maybe you have a chance to be, ever so slightly manipulative. Think about what you're saying. You don't always have to be 100% honest. Okay, you don't have to lie, but you can maybe hide certain things because you're trying to manage impressions, and maybe that's what it's all about, managing impressions. And I think that in terms of managing impression, I think you can do that pretty well. Additionally, Gemini, believe it or not, you can actually come over as being quite dynamic, and you can actually come over as being something of an authority figure, a powerful authority figure. And if you want, I mean, it is an option. So if you feel you're not being taken seriously enough, that you're being ignored, and maybe you feel that other people know more than you, well, that's not something you have to put up with. If you want to demonstrate your authority, show how much knowledge you have, and even how much power you have, then I think you can do it. And you also you have a lot of energy. Believe it or not. You might not feel you have that energy, but once you start applying yourself to something that you feel good about, that you feel passionate about, then I think that there is going to be a great deal that you can achieve. Cancer. Right now, Cancer, you're probably still, getting used to the fact that Saturn is in Aries. Now, I know that Saturn was in Aries last year, so you had a chance to think about what Saturn was like in Aries, but it was passing, and it moved back into Pisces, and so it may have had a sort of a minimal impact on you. But now it's here, and the moon is moving into Aries, and the moon is making a conjunction to Saturn. So this is the first conjunction between the moon and Saturn. Now, every single month in a lunar cycle, there will be that moon-Saturn conjunction in Aries, and maybe I'll have to talk about it every single month. And it sounds difficult, problematic, a moon-Saturn conjunction in Aries. I mean, Aries is an important sign for you. It's a sign that is obviously connected with your ambitions and what you want to create, what you want to put out, what you want to achieve, and that is kind of what you need to take seriously. And so when the moon moves into Aries, as it will, okay, might be this morning if you're in California, it might be tomorrow if you're in Australia. But when the moon does move into Aries, that is a time to be taking yourself seriously, and this is when it perhaps really does occur to you that Saturn is in Aries, and you perhaps have this feeling that you've been working things out, you've been trying to understand what is going on, and it's taken some time, but now it's making sense. It really is making sense, and you're getting a good sense of what you can achieve. But the moon also makes a conjunction to Neptune. Even when the moon is moving through late Pisces, it's starting to make that conjunction to Neptune, and making that conjunction to Saturn. Because remember, we've got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming up. I think it's actually tomorrow that the conjunction becomes exact. And so with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, there may be moments, Cancer, where you do feel unsure of yourself. You're thinking, where is it all going? You had a plan, and now it just seems completely unrealistic because things are changing at the rate of knots. What are you going to do? But these are just passing concerns, and it really is a time, Cancer, to be taking yourself absolutely seriously, and considering, asking yourself, what is possible, and if you put in the work and if you have a focus, then I think you're going to find that a great deal is possible. Now, one other aspect we've got today is we've got a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter's in your sign. It's exalted. I regard Jupiter as almost being a ruler of Cancer, because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. You might disagree with that. And so with Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, there is a challenge here. The Sun has now gone into Pisces, but I think it's quite a pleasant challenge because the Sun and Jupiter, they're both in water signs, and this challenge might relate to your beliefs. You realize something, you see something, you see a possibility. You look at your own beliefs and you maybe question them, and perhaps there are some things that you regard as being really important, that you've always regarded as being very important. Maybe they're almost like articles of faith, and now with the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, you're inclined to have another look at them. You don't want to have another look at them, but it just could be the case, Cancer, that some of your fundamental beliefs, things that you regard as being really important, things have changed. Maybe circumstances have changed. Maybe you have changed. Maybe you have developed. So don't be doctrinaire. Don't think that everything is written in stone. And so I think the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, it might be challenging, but I think it could be very, very productive. And overall, Cancer, a day of two parts. Remember, the moon the moon starts today in Pisces, then it moves into Aries, and so while the moon is in Pisces, obviously a great place for the moon to be in. It's in mutual reception to Jupiter. So, perhaps the first part of the day is going to be easier. There's less to worry about, less to motivate you as well. But when the moon goes into Aries, you may really feel that there is something that needs to be done. Leo, it's okay to take yourself seriously. I mean, you should be taking yourself seriously. You are someone who has a clear idea about how things should be working, where things should be going, and you have a good understanding of authority. You know who has authority, and you can demonstrate authority, if need be. Now, you may not regard yourself as being an authority. You may not regard yourself as having any position of leadership, but there's just something about you that people will take seriously. You know how to express yourself, and you understand the intensity of the situation. Things are intense. I mean, I'm not just talking about you. I'm just talking about for everyone. We are in times which appear to be troubling. I don't think they're actually quite as troubling as they seem to be on the surface, as the media tells us. We're supposed to think that everything's just going to fall apart. I don't think that's the case, but that might be how it seems right now. Of course, different people have their own political agendas. They're trying to show demonstrate how bad things are as a way of attacking their political opponents, but you've got to understand the broader picture, as you do. You really do. I know that Leo's not supposed to be a particularly emotional sign, but the sun is in Pisces. Sun is your ruler, and with the sun in Pisces, you understand what's going on an emotional level, not just an inspirational level. And the sun is making making two semisextiles to Saturn and Neptune. And I think that you should, perhaps regard the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which we're about to have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. I think it's tomorrow that the Saturn and Neptune are exact, or is it the day after? It's very soon. And so Saturn and Neptune, they're two outer planets. They are two collective influences. And the principle of Saturn Neptune is uncertainty, is confusion, trying to create order out of something which intrinsically cannot be ordered. And you are picking up on it. You're picking up on how the world is unfolding, and you feel it, and that's good. I mean, it may not be entirely pleasant to feel how the world is unfolding, but at least you have that knowledge, that emotional knowledge. Yes, emotional knowledge. And so do not underestimate your feelings, and how much your feelings can tell you. And this links back to what I was saying at the beginning of this piece about authority. You can speak with authority because you know. You may not be able to fully explain yourself, but you just know. And maybe it is a mixture of inspiration and sensitivity, and it's all coming together. And because of that knowledge, you are able to be authoritative. You can put yourself in a position where you will be listened to, and you just know. But it's not like you are being negative. Because you understand the situation, you understand what is possible, you understand the way forward. And that means, Leo, that today you may actually be a very effective problem solver. Virgo. Mercury is an important planet. It's certainly an important planet in the Virgo horoscope, because obviously Mercury rules Virgo. So we have to keep a close eye on what Mercury is doing. And today, Mercury is making a semi-square to Pluto. So, with this Mercury semi-square Pluto, this might say something about your attitude, and you may have questions about what's going on around you, what other people are doing, and you might have quite a lot of doubts. This is Pluto in Aquarius, and so with Pluto in Aquarius, that does say something about how you are trying to construct your life. It is about construction. It's about ordering the various aspects of your life, making sure that everything is done properly as far as you are concerned. And with Mercury semi-square Pluto, you might have your doubts, but you're also aware of perhaps your weaknesses. With Mercury in Pisces, this can be a time for Virgos when you do feel that you are being influenced by external forces. There are things that are sort of pushing you around, and with Mercury semi-square Pluto, that might represent you deciding that enough is enough, that something is wrong, that you can't just carry on like you were before, and you have got to assert your power. And I think that you can assert your power with this Mercury semi-square Pluto, but you have to do it properly. You have to do it in an organized way, and that is going to require a great deal of self-discipline. You can't just cause trouble for the sake of it. Even if you feel that it's necessary, you have to, as far as is possible, consider not just other people's interests, but the way other people might behave, because you don't want to create a crisis. You don't want to create a negative reaction. So it does require some diplomacy, but it also requires you to have a sense of where your own self-interests lie, and it's good. It's good that you are thinking about yourself, and you don't want to be disrupted by other people's selfish behavior or other people just discounting you. Maybe some people don't know what you think. They've made assumptions about you, and it could be that you need to put them right in a sort of gentle way. And aside from this, Virgo, it is a time when you have a lot of power, a lot of energy. It's all coming to the surface, or at least it feels that it's coming to the surface. And so it's very important that you're able to use this energy correctly, and ideally you should use it in a sort of a positive way. So it shouldn't, for example, be about veto, telling people not what they can't do, forbidding them from doing particular things. That's not what it should be about. It's about you being constructive. So if you want to assert yourself, and if you really want to assert yourself in a constructive way, then perhaps what you have to do is create something new. Come up with ideas. Be positive. Perhaps tell people that things are good, but they could always be done in a better way. And meanwhile, you're always thinking about what other people are like, what their motivations are like, and you're trying to be sensitive. So it's a very human day when you do have to think about your social and interpersonal environment, and you also have to think about yourself. So it's a difficult balance to get right. But I do feel if you use this Mercury semi-square Pluto in the right way, you should be able to get people to listen to you, and you can perhaps be ever so gently manipulative. So, you come over as someone who has everyone's best interests at heart, and people listen to you, and they think you're a force for good. I'm sure you are a force for good. And, in the end, things work out to just fine. Libra. What is the main aspect today? Well, there's nothing really desperate going on at the moment. Nothing that really sort of demands your attention. Although, we do have the moon moving out of Pisces and moving into Aries. So, moon moving into Aries, that's going to be especially important if you are in the Americas. I mean, in California, late morning, the moon moves into Aries, and of course, when the moon moves into Aries, it makes a conjunction to Saturn and Neptune, and so moon making a conjunction to Saturn and Neptune, might say something about other people, how you relate to other people. It is a reminder as well that Saturn's in Aries. Saturn is in your opposite sign, and with Saturn in Aries, it's a time, Libra, where you do have to be careful how you relate to other people. Other people can be a real pain. They can take up a lot of your time. They're just there, and so with the moon conjunct Saturn and Neptune, you might be well aware of the restrictions placed upon you. It just can't be helped, but you shouldn't at the same time feel helpless. Some people can't be avoided, and if people can't be avoided, well, you just have to maybe work around the problem and also get used to the problem. So you I don't know whether one should mix systems. I mean, thinking about Saturn in Aries, but Saturn's in your opposite sign, and it's in Aries and it's fallen. So is that a bad thing? Well, Saturn's got to be somewhere, and you can always say something negative about it. But it just may be that with Saturn in Aries, you have an opportunity to understand other people. And Saturn as a planet, it does have a connection with you, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. So you could argue that Saturn is one of your rulers. I mean, I know Venus is the ruler of Libra, but you could argue that Saturn has a kind of rulership there. And so with Saturn in Aries, I think you have a chance to understand people over the next couple of years. I mean, of course, because Saturn stays in Aries until 2028, and of course, with Moon making a conjunction to Saturn today or perhaps tomorrow, that really just rams it home that Saturn is in Aries, and you've got this Moon conjunct Saturn here. So do think about other people and their influence on you, and then think about what kind of influence you can have on them. So to begin with, it might feel that you don't have so much power, that you're losing power, but that's your first impressions. But when you get to know other people, when you get to know their weaknesses, you'll be able to really start sort of moving forward with things. So don't get upset if, to begin with, you're not making much progress. I think you could. I mean, there is something about today, like yesterday, which might feel a little frustrating and confusing, and you might feel that you can't make a great deal of progress, and indeed it could be worse. You could get distracted. You may feel you have to go in a particular direction. I mean, the reason for this is if you look at the chart, if you look closely at the chart, at what's going on today. We know that Saturn, Neptune making a conjunction. They're making a conjunction on the Aries point. Saturn Neptune conjunction in the first degree of Aries. and Mars is at 21 degrees Aquarius. And you can see by eye from this chart that Venus is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, it's on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, and it's on the Mars-Aries midpoint. So Venus, your ruler, is on a load of midpoints at the moment, including the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so that could be confusing, because Venus being either side, being right in the middle of Mars and Saturn, being in the middle of Mars and Neptune, where are you going? And you might think you need an answer to that, but maybe you don't need any answers right now. And also, Libra, you should understand that you are picking up on what is going on in the world anyway. It's the world you're living in. It's a world we're all living in. And it's just important not to take it personally and not to feel that you need to get immediate results. So if things are slow, if things are moving at a glacial pace, I wouldn't worry about it. Things will certainly improve. And don't forget, Venus, it might be on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, but that is a relatively short-term thing. Over the next couple of days, it will move away from a Mars-Saturn midpoint, and additionally, Venus, don't forget, is moving towards a trine of Jupiter. It's getting actually quite close. It's just 4 degrees from the trine of Jupiter. So as Venus moves towards that trine of Jupiter over the next few days, you're going to become more and more positive. So if you do feel any sort of frustrations today, I think they're just temporary, and soon enough you'll start to see things in a new way, and you'll start to realize that things aren't so bad, and in fact that you can be pretty fortunate. Scorpio, you might be feeling that you don't want to be too involved with other people. This has been an issue for the last couple of days. Other people have been a problem. Particularly if you tried to understand them, if you tried to get close to them, they just might not have been particularly helpful, and maybe it's because they were just holding something back, or they didn't want to engage, or it might be that there was just something bothering them, and because there was something bothering them, they were putting up the barriers, not particularly responsive to your ideas, and that is the way it is. And really, there's nothing much to worry about. You're in a position now, Scorpio, where you can, by and large, do your own thing, and make sure you do it well. I think that is important. You do it well, and you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for anyone else. And once you realise that, then why do you need to worry about other people? At the moment, you can just do what matters, and at the same time, you can be something of a perfectionist. If you want to be a perfectionist, I think you can. So you start something, you feel good about it, and you move forward with it, and you realise it's good, but it could be better. And so as you move into tomorrow, you can really start to sort of fine-tune your activities, and you perhaps, you move from a rough draft to something more final, more closer to that finished and almost perfect end product. So that is something that you can very much work on. And I must emphasize, as far as other people are concerned, I'm thinking also about those people close to you. People close to you just might not be on good form. And there's then the question about how do you respond. Some people might be worried. You might be thinking about people who are, broadly speaking, in a good position, but short term they're just bothered. They think that things could go wrong. And the question then is, Scorpio, what do you do about it? Now, I've just said that if you want to ignore people, then that's probably okay, because some people are just a pain. They don't, they're not trying. So yeah, why should you try? But maybe in terms of people closer to you, the people you spend a lot of time with, then there may be something that needs to be done. So if you feel with that Scorpio sensitivity that someone is maybe underperforming, someone is something is bothering them, maybe you need to listen to what they're saying, hear them out, and it's quite possible, Scorpio, that you can come up with some really, really good solutions. You can really get down to the basics. You can look at the details, and if you find that someone is being constructive and is not being overwhelmed by negativity, then I think there's some really sort of useful work that you can do. Sagittarius. For most of the day, for most of us, the moon is moving through Pisces. I mean, it does move into Aries in the end. Okay, if you're in California, in fact, the moon moves into Aries late this morning. But while the moon is in Pisces, it's a time when you might not feel particularly inclined to do anything. You're just happy where you are, almost happy where you are. I mean, that would be nice if you could be happy where you were. There's still something bothering you, and it's perhaps an irritation. It's a disturbance. Something that you thought was 100% fine, and then you realize that maybe it's not perfect. It just could be a lot better. And so if you feel that something needs to change, Sagittarius, then I think that you perhaps need to take action. Perhaps you need to take decisive action. And so if you can act decisively, but in your own way, at your own pace. I mean, not completely at your own pace. You've got to do things, within a particular time frame. But if you realize that something's not perfect and you want to do something about it, then I think that you can really fix it. You can sort the problem out, and your capacity for thinking about problems, for noticing problems, is right now is very good. And maybe you can almost see how something could go wrong in a prophetic way. I don't think we need to necessarily talk about prophecy, but if it just occurs to you that something might just blow up or break or cause a lot of damage, act immediately. That's the way it is, isn't it? We see things and we know it's going to break. We know there's going to be a disaster, but we just don't do anything about it. But we actually have time to act. It might be something completely trivial. You see that an object is placed in somewhere dangerous, and we see it, and then we don't do anything about it. You just know, oh, that's in a dangerous place. That could go wrong. And we just walk away. And then hours later, even days later, something bad happens. So do think cognitively, about your environment. And if you just notice something that could explode, that could cause a problem, correct the problem immediately before you forget about it. And sometimes you see a problem 5 seconds before it happens, 5 seconds before the disaster happens, but you act quickly, and that might be just such a good thing to do. You could save yourself and perhaps other people a lot of trouble by taking that kind of safety first approach. And I know that I've suggested that it's going to be quite an introspective day, but that doesn't mean to say, Sagittarius, that you're not able to deal with other people. I think you can actually deal with other people extremely well. You may not want to, but there's something about you that is very sort of vibrant and determined, and you seem to be sure of yourself, and in your own way you can perhaps be quite a motivating influence. And then we've got the moon moving into Aries, so moon moves into Aries at some stage in the day. Okay, it might not be until tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And the moon moving into a fire sign, and also the moon is making a conjunction to Saturn. And so this conjunction to Saturn, and also it's making a conjunction to Neptune. This is the moon's first conjunction to Saturn since it's entered Aries, and it might just remind you of what it's all about and what Saturn is all about. And with Saturn in Aries, it can be a time when Sagittarians need to take themselves seriously. They need to take their uniqueness seriously. Of course, Sagittarius, you are unique, and Saturn is telling you about your unique path. It might also be reminding you that not everyone is going to agree with you, not everyone is going to support you. There's always a cost to following a unique path, but if something feels good, it feels right to you, for you, then you need to go with it. Saturn is in the fifth house from Sagittarius, and I don't know to what extent one can sort of mix Vedic astrology and Western astrology, but I mean, in Vedic astrology, the fifth house is, I think it is called a Purva Punya house, and Purva Punya is about past life credit. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about reincarnation, but if you've got Saturn moving into the fifth house, this is perhaps a time when you need to think about what has been built up in the past, what you have worked on in the past, and maybe you've been working on things in the past and you felt that you weren't properly rewarded. And now with Saturn moving into Aries, and the moon, of course, amplifying this because it's making its conjunction to Saturn, so Sagittarius, you can perhaps start to benefit from what you were doing in the past. Maybe you weren't properly rewarded, and now with Saturn in Aries, you have to demand those rewards. And but in order to demand those rewards, you've got to be an active individualist, and maybe that is a challenge over the next couple of years. To be an active individualist, and with Moon moving into Aries, making that conjunction to Saturn, you are perhaps given a further sign that this is what you're supposed to be doing. Capricorn. Saturn is very close to Neptune now, very close. It's pretty much there. It's pretty much making the conjunction to Neptune, and Saturn Neptune conjunctions can be problematic. I've got a Saturn Neptune square in my chart. I should perhaps be more worried about this Saturn Neptune conjunction, because if you've got a very close aspect between outer planets, you might be very responsive to the cycle. So maybe the Saturn Neptune conjunction is going to affect me. I'm not a Capricorn, no. But with the Saturn and Neptune conjunction, remember, Neptune is conjunct Saturn. Neptune is being influenced by Saturn, is being influenced by Neptune. Neptune is about dissolving things. And, being a Capricorn, you would like things to be straightforward. You want to be able to touch them. You want to know what you're dealing with. And with Neptune close to Saturn, that might be hard work. Things could sort of disappear in front of you, or at least seem to disappear. And now that the moon is making the conjunction to Saturn and Neptune, you might be really feeling it sort of more than usual. And so where would you feel this? I mean, I will be talking more about Saturn and Neptune, but in another video, maybe in a video for tomorrow. But this Saturn Neptune conjunction, it is in a significant part of your chart, and it can be about belonging and who you are, where you've come from. And so with Saturn Neptune conjunction, you may be having second thoughts. Do you really belong? Is this the right place for you? Where are you living? You might have been living in a house or an apartment flat for a long time, and you're starting to think, is this right? What used to be familiar could suddenly become alien. Even if we're dealing with something that's been going on for decades, suddenly you're asking, this just feels unreal. And the question then is, Capricorn, is this something genuine that you need to act on, or is it just a response to the times in which we're living? This Saturn and Neptune conjunction is important, but it will fade. Saturn will eventually move on, it will move beyond Neptune, and perhaps some of the uncertainties of that conjunction will calm down. But while it's there, and don't forget, Saturn and Neptune is on the Aries point, and because it's on the Aries point, you are thinking about the alienation of everyone. There is a lot of work on psychologically on things like place attachment. People do get attached to places, communities, cities, towns, and places change. They don't. What did the Beatles say? There are places I remember, some have changed, some not for better, or whatever the line goes. It's like that, and maybe that's how it feels. And you're very aware of the past. That's always a problem, isn't it? You had a nice time somewhere 20, 30 years ago, and then you go back there and you just want to cry because it's just not the same place. It's been destroyed, or at least it seems to have been destroyed. So this might be the way you feel about this moon making the conjunction to Saturn, conjunction to the Neptune. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, by the way. It's something you need to see. It's something that you need to experience, and I think that you do need to think now about what is home. How do you define home? And perhaps you hadn't thought about it enough, and you're thinking, well, no, this maybe you start to think this is alien territory. And if you think that something is alien territory, well, you go do something about it. You create a change, and it might be a change that takes place on a spiritual and sort of personal level. Maybe it's about change of attitude. Maybe it's a change of cognition. But it might also be the case that some kind of physical, geographical change is needed. Maybe not now, but perhaps over the next couple of years. Aquarius. Saturn is getting close to that conjunction to Neptune. Don't forget, it's really close, and Saturn is, of course, your ruler. Saturn rules Aquarius. So Saturn being close to Neptune in Aries, and the Moon moving into Aries. Today there could be moments of confusion. Okay, if not today, then tomorrow. As far as when that Saturn Neptune conjunction is, I've been talking about this Saturn and Neptune conjunction rather a lot, and I need to be more precise about when this Saturn Neptune conjunction is. So this Saturn Neptune conjunction is tomorrow. It is at 4:53 p.m. London time. It's happening, and you really are starting to feel it. And there just may be times where you don't know what's going on, and if you if you hear something, I don't know, if you check the facts, or you think you're checking the facts. I mean, I've checked the facts. I'm pretty sure about that. There's a Saturn-Neptune conjunction tomorrow, the 20th. But if you are checking facts, then double check and triple check. And what you're told may not be true. It may just be lies, or it might be a deception, or someone might not know what they're talking about. So it's very important at the moment that you don't take things at face value. You know, whatever it is, you've got to do, you know, independent research to make sure that you really have sorted it out. And that's something you can do. It's not going to be a problem. You know, and being an Aquarian, you should enjoy that kind of activity, doing something which involves, you know, discovering things, finding out new information, but finding it out for yourself. You don't want to get caught up in second-hand information, because that second-hand information might be wrong. It might be out of date. Now, one aspect we do have today is Sun semisextile. Sun semisextile Saturn. It is exact today. Okay, I think if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's going to be more exact than if you're in the Americas. But you know, what you've got is you've got Sun at the beginning of Pisces, you've got Saturn at the beginning of Aries, and these two planets, Sun and Saturn, together, they might say something about relationships and how other people are behaving and how you respond to them. And it just could be today that you feel, when you're dealing with people, that there's a certain mismatch. You're not entirely connected with them. It's not like there's a complete clash, you're in argument mode or anything like that, but something doesn't quite fit. You and them are just on a different wavelength, and there might be a tendency to just say, well, that is the case, that's the way it is, and just have to live with it. But you know, this is a semi-sextile, and I think with the semi-sextiles, you very often have to work on them. You know, like with quincunxes, you work on them. And so if you find that you and someone else are not on the same wavelength, there needs to be something you do about it. You don't have, you know, again, it's not about having an argument. It's just, it might be about understanding another person's perspective, and also recognizing that at some level they're right. And the Sun is in Pisces, and so Sun is in an emotional sign, Pisces. And so maybe someone else has an emotional perspective which you are not particularly sympathetic with. It doesn't make sense to you. It's not logical, but that doesn't mean to say that you should dismiss it. And so, you know, when dealing with other people, particularly if these people are close to you, I think it's very important to be open-minded, and you know, to consider the possibility that, you know, different people have different modes of operating, and it's not just about logic, and that the emotional mode can be just as valid as something sort of more rational and intellectual. Pisces. We've still got a lot of planets in Pisces. This is probably as good as it gets. 4 planets in Pisces. We are going to get, you know, because the moon is about to move out of Pisces into Aries. Now there is going to be a time at the beginning of March when you've got 4 planets in Pisces, when you're going to have Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars in Pisces. So it's not absolute peak Pisces. We kind of get a double peak here. You know, with these planets in Pisces, and moon is, well, moon is in Pisces, certainly at the beginning of the day. In California, it moves into Aries, you know, late morning. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will be in Pisces all day. But you know, with these planets in Pisces, it's still kind of new moon time, because the sun and the moon, with the sun and the moon both in Pisces, with the moon now waxing, you're perhaps aware that you've got something of a new beginning here. That's kind of how it feels. You're perhaps not quite ready to move forward with everything, but you know that things have changed, and I think that in most cases, you should be feeling you should be feeling quite confident, and there's no need to take things too far. There's no need to exaggerate, and you might feel that you have to take something too far, perhaps because you feel rushed. But there's no need to really go over the top, particularly on an emotional level. I mean, you could. I mean, that is possible. Just to get over emotional, to get worked up about something, or perhaps to be too generous, emotionally generous, or even financially generous. So generosity. I mean, it's good to be generous. It's always good to be warm and friendly, but you can take things too far. You certainly don't want to have any feelings of guilt, feeling that there's something you absolutely should do, something you must give, something you must offer. No, I mean, that's not the case. And with all these planets in Pisces, it's important to put yourself first. And also, I think you can be very dynamic. I think that you can come over as someone who means business, and I think that people will take you seriously, and that seems to be a recipe for a reasonably good day. Now, one thing though, Mercury is making a semi-square to Pluto. Now, that Mercury semi-square Pluto, remember, Mercury is in your sign, and it could be that one or two people are being ever so slightly manipulative. Perhaps you're dealing with people who maybe worm their way into your confidence, and they might be playing games, trying to get you to believe something that isn't necessarily true. And so that's one thing you might want to be careful about. So don't be too trusting today. Now, that doesn't mean to say that no one can be trusted, but you've got to you've got to be careful, and certainly it's certainly not a time to take things at face value. On a slightly different note, be wary of people that don't say much. If someone says nothing and it kind of regards you as being strange that someone is saying nothing, then it could well be that something is going on, and maybe you should ask some questions. Find out what someone is thinking. If you feel that you need to know, then maybe you can sort of use your assertiveness and also the sensitivity of your sign to work out what exactly is happening. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now it's time to move to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 16, which is contentment. The Wilhelm translation calls it enthusiasm. And this is a bit of a problem hexagram, because the issue is one of complacency. We might be excited about things. We might think that things are going to go our way, but we haven't really thought it through. That is a problem with enthusiasm. We can be as enthusiastic as we like about something, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. And maybe even if it does happen, what else is going to happen? We tend to focus on the positives. I think this is the problem, with astrology, that there is pressure, of course, to give positive forecasts, say that everything is going to be wonderful. Reality is, in astrology, it's easier to predict bad news than good news. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And so there can be this complacency and just feeling that everything is going to be fine. And this is the problem with this hexagram. And it can be about kind of seeing disaster on the horizon, seeing bad stuff going on, at some date in the future, but thinking, well, that's tomorrow, that's next year. I don't have to worry about it now. And so that can be an issue here. However, in this case, we've got the second line moving. And the second line moving is actually very useful. And the second line is really saying that we are actually down to earth. Things might be fine now. We can see that we're okay right now. But we know that it's not going to get better. And, well, so that's a bit negative. But, I didn't mean to say it quite like that. We know there's a problem and we are starting to prepare for it. And, we're not distracted. I mean, we could be distracted. And maybe other people are tied up in fantasy and delusion, but not us. And perhaps we can enjoy the moment. Perhaps we can partake of the merrymaking, but we just know it's not going to last. And because we know that it's not going to last, we are in a position to make preparations and be ready to take action if necessary. Now, second line moving, and that means we move to a second hexagram, and that hexagram is hexagram number 40, which is deliverance. And deliverance is about escape. It's about making our escape. Things are bad, and we have a chance to get out. Yeah, we can. It can really happen. We can just get out. And we will have that chance. We won't have forever to escape, but we'll have that opportunity. And so if you put these two hexagrams together, it might be saying you don't have to do anything dramatically right now, but you have to prepare an escape route. So if you're involved in something that you have doubts about, then start thinking about the exits. Start thinking about what could go wrong. I mean, isn't that the case? They always say, whenever you go into a building, or a plane, you should, the sensible person is always going to be looking for where the escape routes are. So if you, I don't know, wherever it is, whether you're going to a cinema or a theatre or I don't know, wherever. You look, exactly how you're going to get out. And I mean, I know that's a sensible advice, and I know that that's a sort of those involved with disasters. Apparently, that's what they always do. They check that that those who are involved in safety and disaster planning, they will see where the exits are, and perhaps that's what we're doing here. And it doesn't mean to say you have to panic straight away, but so. Putting it all together, it's about realism and being prepared for the worst, even if the worst never happens. And now I want to finish by looking at the supposed curse of the fire horse. And this part of this video is going to be pretty chaotic. And so if we think about what I said right at the beginning of this video, I said that in 1966 in Japan, the birth rate collapsed, and particularly the birth rate for girls. Now, that's kind of slightly disturbing. I mean, why would that have been the case? I mean, that suggests sort of horrendous possibilities. I mean, this was at a time, where you did not, I don't believe you didn't have sort of prenatal scanning for gender. There is a suggestion that if a child was, say, born in the fire horse, then the date would be changed, so it would be kept secret. They'd be perhaps born in a different year. So the fire horse, why? Well, because there is a 60-year cycle. Now, I should make it clear when I'm doing this part of the video, I've not looked about what it means to be a horse, what it means to be a fire horse. I'm doing this in a completely logical way. I'm trying to be logical at any rate. you have 5 signs, you have you have 12 animals, you have 5 elements, and so that means 5 times 12 is 60. So you have a repetition, every 60 years. And so 1966 was a year of a fire horse. 19 This year, 2026, is a year of a fire horse. So so I'm not thinking about the definitions of a horse here. Yeah, I'm just trying to be logical. So I can remember in the late 1980s, I was working in a factory that they created. It was a hydroponic seed factory in Dalston. So Dalston is. Where's Dalston? Dalston is in North London. I think it's quite close to Hackney, and so it was late 1980s. It was actually early 1989, and this was in Britain, and the big excitement was a boxing match, and there was this boxing match that was scheduled between Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno. And everyone in Britain was really getting excited because Frank Bruno, he was British, he was, they were fighting for the heavyweight champion of the world. Well, I know there are different heavyweight. I mean, I know nothing about boxing, by the way, but they were fighting for the heavyweight champion of the world, and everyone in Britain was getting excited. Frank Bruno was, people were going to get excited about him winning, and everyone was talking about it. And there was someone who I was working with, and he, I think in his evening work was a nightclub bouncer. That's what he did, and we were talking about this. We were talking about this big fight, and he said, "Not a chance. Absolutely not a chance." He said Mike Tyson was going to destroy Frank Bruno. No doubt about it at all. Now, Mike Tyson was, of course, born. He was born in 1966. In fact, have I got Mike Tyson's chart? I don't have his time of birth, but here's Mike Tyson's horoscope. So he is a fire horse, born on June the 30th, 1966. And interestingly, the person I was talking to, who just knew, he was a nightclub bouncer. He knew about violence, and it was all completely obvious to him that Mike Tyson was just going to destroy Frank Bruno. It was just going to happen. And that was a real revelation to me, because you've been reading a newspaper, everyone getting excited about Frank Bruno, and so the person telling me this, he was also born I believe he was born in 1966. So he was also I had a situation where I had a fire horse talking about another fire horse, and I don't know a great deal about Mike Tyson, but clearly he had a fairly turbulent life. But he was a natural fighter. He came off the streets, as far as I know, and of course, in reality, he did indeed destroy Frank Bruno. Frank Bruno didn't really have a chance. So that's certainly a good example of a fire horse. Someone who is quite difficult, had a tough upbringing, and boxing may have helped keep him out of trouble. I mean, he had other things going on in his life. I don't want to go into sort of details, but he has had quite a turbulent life. And as far as female fire horses, interestingly, my sister, she's a fire horse, and my sister, I don't think anything particularly bad has happened to her. I'm not going to say anything negative about her, because that's not, I can't really do that, can I? But it's but in terms of her career, she's very successful, relatively successful. She's head of a small publishing company in London, which is kind of surprising. I didn't really think, when I knew her as, when she was a child, I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen. But that's what she did. She knows about books. She loves books, and she's pretty successful at what she does. There was someone I also knew I didn't know them very well. But in the 90s and late 80s, I knew them, and someone but actually born very close to my sister, within a few days of my sister, and she suddenly came from nowhere and just became a very successful journalist. It was just kind of really surprising. She just suddenly appeared, and suddenly she was, writing for The Guardian, and I think she still writes for The Guardian. I think she's an agony aunt for The Guardian, and she very kindly reviewed one of my books. I wrote a couple of books in the mid-90s, or co-wrote some books in the co-90s, and she very kindly gave a nice review for the book. So again, I didn't know her well, but those are examples of two fire horses that I know of, and nothing bad has happened to them. And they're both female, and the problem with fire horses, particularly relates to women, because that was the case in Japan. It was this reduction in birth, particularly in terms of the birth of girls. But maybe we need to think about the fire horse in a different way. I mean, this is the year of the fire horse. It's supposed to be problematic. Is there any evidence that the fire horse is problematic? That's 2020, 2026 has just started, and I know that there's plenty of things to go wrong in 2026. When we think about the wars going on, whether it's in Sudan or Ukraine or the Middle East, the concerns about the economy. I do believe that many of these concerns, at least in the short term, are unfounded. So maybe we should think back to the last time that we had the year of the fire horse, and of course the last time was 1966. And so what happened in 1966? What happened in terms of Chinese culture in 1966? Well, I'll tell you one thing that happened in 1966, and that was the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution was launched on May the 16th, 1966, and it happened in response to a play. I think the play was called Hai Ru, Dismissal from Office, and this was about Hai Ru was some official in the Ming Dynasty, and this play was about him. I mean, it seemed innocuous, but this play was seen as being potentially critical of the communist regime, and it kind of became controversial. So we had the Cultural Revolution, and the Cultural Revolution, 1 or 2 million people died as a result of the Cultural Revolution. You had a load of other stuff going on. We know the thing, teachers being attacked by their students, people being thrown out of windows, city workers being forced to work in the rice fields, and it was the time of Mao's Little Red Book. So from a Chinese perspective, and we are talking about something Chinese, the fire horse, the last time there was a fire horse, it was absolutely destructive for the Chinese culture. A lot of things were smashed up. Have this idea of year zero. Historical artifacts were destroyed. Trying to erase history, and so the fire horse might be about things happening which are sort of dramatic and maybe horrific, and we don't know what's going to happen in China in China this time round with the fire horse. But certainly 60 years ago, it was the time of the Cultural Revolution. Now, as far as Britain is concerned, Britain is a fire horse. You could argue that Britain is a fire horse, because one of the charts you can use for Britain is when William the Conqueror came to the throne, and he came to the throne on Christmas Day 1066. So here's a chart of England. So I mean, it says December the 31st, but that's because this program likes to convert Christmas Day, December the 25th, to the Gregorian calendar. So England is a fire horse. Now, when William the Conqueror came to the throne, that that was a big event, and you could say that that England as an enterprise has been quite successful so far. But on its way, there have been sort of hiccups. Of course, at the moment, England is still it's taken over, Wales and Scotland, and still a part of Ireland. And so it might well be the case that England is quite sensitive to the Chinese, to the Chinese year, and in particular to when we have the year of the fire horse. Now, 1846 was a year of a fire horse. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? Because 2026, 1966, before that is 1906, and then before that you've got 1846. Now, 1846 was also the year in which Neptune was discovered, by the way. Here's a chart, by the way, of Neptune's discovery. And so you could say that the confusion of Neptune was unleashed on the planet during the year of the fire horse, September the 24th, 1846. Now, as far as the UK is concerned, now I did when in Britain you take these courses between the 16 and 18 called A levels, and I did a politics A level, and I remember the politics A level had two parts. One was about British government, and the other one was about political history, and it was really boring. You had to just go through. There was a whole book full of acts of Parliament, poor laws. I mean, very very useful to have poor laws going through the 19th century. There were all sorts of poor laws and factory laws, factory acts relating to children work, how long children could work, and you could see how it became, increasingly progressive. And so it was really 19th century English history can be really boring. And one of the most important events in British history happened in 1846, and it was the repeal of the Corn Laws. That sounds completely boring and administrative, but there was a 28% tariff on wheat coming into on corn coming into the country from outside. And don't forget, this was the time of the Irish famine, so it was an issue. And they decided in 1846, I think they made a decision before the Chinese New Year in 1846. So in 1846, the Corn Laws were repealed. This had a dramatic impact. It split the Conservative Party, and I mean, again, this is really complicated political detail, but that split in the Conservative Party had a dramatic impact. And I think that if I've got it right, the Conservatives were out of power for a long time, but it caused immense political turmoil in the political system when the Corn Laws were repealed. And believe it or not, the repealing of the Corn Laws was the most important event in Britain, one of the most important events in Britain in 1846. So 1906, I don't know, 1906, I think there was an election in 1906. You had a fairly progressive government in 1906, which was, it started. You had the beginnings of the welfare state, which is certainly a good thing. I think to an extent, a good thing. Then 1966. What about 1966? And with 1966, here is a chart of the 1966 new moon. The last time we had this, and with 1966, you had this is a new moon, beginning of the Chinese New Year at 1 degree 10 Aquarius. So on the surface, I mean, a good year. You had the government, Harold Wilson's government, which was elected in 1964, was re-elected with a substantial majority, and additionally, most important thing, England won the World Cup. So England winning a World Cup in 1966. This is an incredibly important event in British cultural history, because England hasn't won the World Cup since. And it's, I don't know. Of course, maybe now with the last time England won the World Cup was the year of the fire horse. England is a fire horse, and so maybe this time round there's a World Cup. Yeah, there's a World Cup. It's in America, isn't it? In the US. I haven't really been following the World Cup, but maybe this is England's year. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying it is. I'm certainly not making a prediction here, but because it's a year of the fire horse, so you might think if this is a new moon for 1966, you would think that would be that would be linked. Maybe we need to look at the transits for winning the World Cup. So here is a chart for the final whistle on June the 30th, 1966. I think it was around 5:15 p.m. when England beat Germany in the World Cup final and took the crown and never to get it again. So might it be the case that one should look perhaps at transits to that final whistle chart? Transits to the new moon 1066 chart to get an idea about whether there is anything going on. So at the time of that new moon, at the beginning of a Chinese New Year, Jupiter was at 22 degrees Gemini, and so Mars was at 2253 Gemini. Now, that says something about the World Cup in general. I mean, Mars hitting Jupiter, that may say something about sport, and someone's going to win the World Cup in 1966. I don't think that Mars hitting the new moon Jupiter is necessarily specific to Britain. What kind of is interesting is Saturn. Look at Saturn. Saturn is on Skeet, very close to Skeet, that fixed star relating to disaster. And so there was something nasty. If you take the beginning of the Chinese New Year and you take that new moon, that first new moon in Aquarius, the beginning of a Chinese New Year, and you see that Saturn is in Skeet, Saturn is conjunct Skeet, there's something fundamentally unpleasant there. And that may really be linking to something to do with Britain. And also, China, we had the Cultural Revolution. There was something Skeet-like, maybe there was something Skeet-like about the Cultural Revolution in 1966. So, looking at England's chart. So remember, England has its moon at 29 degrees 3 Pisces. Now, England's moon is not on Skeet because the precession of the equinoxes. Skeet would have been quite a few degrees before 29 degrees Pisces at this time. So Saturn was conjunct England's moon at the time of that new moon, of that first new moon in 1966. Saturn was conjunct England's moon at the time of the final whistle. Now, you would not normally associate that event, the peak of Britain's sporting, I don't know, whatever. That was the peak. Doesn't get any better than that. Winning the World Cup. Saturn was on England's moon. The moon can represent the people. I mean, that is one way of looking at it. And so, I don't know, Saturn was just not a very Saturnine event. But the moon can also represent children. And 1966 did see an absolutely horrendous disaster. And this disaster was the the Aberfan disaster. So the Aberfan was a mining community in Wales, and there was a slag heap there. And the slag heap was above a school, and it had been raining, and this slag heap smashed into this school and totally destroyed it, totally enveloped it in slag. And I think that basically over 100 children were killed, plus teachers. It was a total disaster. It was you think about the World Cup and Harold Wilson winning re-election. This was perhaps one of the defining events in 1966 for Britain. So Saturn was not on skeet. I mean, Saturn had moved backwards. It had moved off skeet by the time of the Aberfan disaster. But Saturn was opposition Uranus. So. And that might be important. So if we go back to the new moon, and if we relocate the new moon for Aberfan, now you can see that it says Merthyr Tydfil. So Merthyr Tydfil is a town about 4 miles away from Aberfan, but I corrected the coordinates to fit Aberfan. So that is a new moon for Aberfan, January the 21st, beginning of the Chinese New Year. Yeah, set for Aberfan. And so if you compare that new moon set for Aberfan with the actual positions at the time of the Aberfan disaster, that new moon set for Aberfan had its midheaven at 23 degrees 9 Pisces. So this Saturn-Uranus opposition was pretty much exactly on the midheaven, and the midpoint of Saturn and Uranus would be at around 23 Pisces. And so I think this is an argument for saying that, and I know I'm mixing up Chinese and Western astrology, but if you set the chart for that first new moon in Aquarius, the beginning of the Chinese New Year, maybe that chart is sensitive, and when there are aspects to it that might indicate disaster. And remember, Britain is a fire horse, and so there is some evidence. 1846, repeal of the Corn Laws. Repeal of the Corn Laws really smashed the governing party. And you think about what's going on now, 180 years later, we've got the governing party really, the Labour Party is kind of really falling apart now. They just had their U-turn. They did want to cancel some of the local elections. They've had to go back on that. So things are really fracturing. And I think if you go back to these, and you remember that England is a fire horse, 1066, and you look at 1846 and you look at 1966. Yeah, I know that in 1966 the governing party won an election, but that was 1966. In 1846 the governing party fractured. I think the 1846 fire horse is more relevant to England than what was going on in 1966, although we have to remember the Aberfan disaster, which really was, I think, shown by that new moon, that new moon in which began the year of the fire horse at the beginning of 1966. So 1906. I mean, very quickly. I mean, sort of moving away from the UK. Of course, 1906 is famous for the San Francisco earthquake. This took place on April the 18th, 1906, and how important was this earthquake? I mean, it was quite an iconic earthquake. I mean, it was quite an iconic disaster. I'm sure there were lots of other disasters in 1906, but maybe this disaster, really, really stands out. And so perhaps this may be a feature of the fire horse. Particular disasters, some are human, some are sort of half human, half the elements. Like Aberfan. Here it's a natural disaster, the earthquake, or you have the Cultural Revolution. So, I'm being quite vague and sort of up in the air here, but I think that there's kind of some evidence here that maybe the year of the fire horse, could be problematic. And I think the year of the fire horse, well, if we go back from a Chinese perspective, of course, last time the year was in the fire horse, we had the Cultural Revolution. Maybe something similar will happen in China. We're not going to have another Cultural Revolution. It might say something about China and what's going on in China. But in terms of the UK, we already know that the British government is falling apart, and it's the year of the fire horse has just started. We know what happened in 1846 with the repeal of the Corn Laws, and so I think that overall, I think that this probably is quite bad news for the Labour, for the governing Labour Party. So anyway, I warned you that my thoughts on the fire horse were going to be pretty chaotic, but I hope you found that of some interest. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.